There are no international rescue teams here, no international aid workers. The people of northwest Syria have been left to deal with the disaster on their own. Last week's earthquakes that struck southern Turkey devastated many areas in this country as well. Their lives now a pile of dust.
We are vegetable sellers. Our shops were underneath our homes. Now we lost everything. We're sleeping in the streets. No one from the international community is helping us.
Genderes was one of the towns in the opposition-controlled enclave worst hit by the two quakes. It's day 9 of that disaster. Rescuers who have been appealing for heavy equipment still haven't received any as they remove the remaining bodies in the rubble. Across the border in southern Turkey, missing survivors are still being found alive and pulled from the ruins. Here in northwest Syria, the search and rescue effort was called off on day 5 because rescuers didn't have the resources they say could have saved many lives. So far, the aid entering the opposition north is not enough for people's needs. The UN says Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has now given approval to use more border crossings from Turkey, a statement that has angered the opposition.
The United Nations seems to look at Bashar al-Assad as their Secretary General. They're waiting for him to give them the okay. 9 days into a major earthquake. I don't know in the history of the United Nations that they had not responded to something, and it's the hardest hit area in Syria.
In government-controlled territories, planes loaded with humanitarian aid have been arriving continuously. They're also where United Nations agencies are based. In the north, the UN has acknowledged failing Syria with an inadequate response. It says that will change, but many here are doubtful there will be any sustained international help.
We have no heaters, no blankets, nothing, just a tent over our heads. Our shops were destroyed. Who will help us to rebuild our lives?
The scars of 12 years of war have still not healed in a region where millions are displaced and poor. Now there's a new crisis for a people whose sole purpose has long been to survive. Zena Khuder, Al Jazeera, Northwest Syria.
Ghassan Hito is head of the Syrian Forum, an organisation which has been providing aid inside northwestern Syria. He joins us live now from Istanbul, and you have just returned from the region. Can you describe to us what you encountered and what you witnessed while you were there?
Thank you very much. Let me first offer my sincere condolences to the people of Turkey for the massive loss of lives, and also for the Syrian people for their tragic losses as well. I have just returned from northwest Syria, where I visited 16 locations between towns, villages, cities. The situation is quite disheartening, and it's really a desperate situation, as Syria has been forgotten before the earthquake that hit the region on Monday, February 6th at 4:15 a.m. and since then continues to be forgotten. I have witnessed in these 16 locations hundreds of buildings that have collapsed completely. I have seen people living in the street. I have seen bodies being extracted from under the rubbles. A scene that was very, very painful and very difficult to describe. Most of these difficult scenes was in Genderes, where not a single street that you walk through or drive through does not have buildings that have been completely destroyed. Actually, the exception in the scene, if you see a building that still standing up. So I can go through a lot of details on what the scene is like. I've seen in the town of Tlul, a town that was hit by the earthquake, and it has about 15 buildings that were completely destroyed. But since it is near the Alasi River, a dam was also broken. So The town was also flooded. And it was freezing cold. It's below 0 Celsius. And I've seen people carrying their belongings from one spot to another, wading through a very, very cold water, almost a freezing temperature water.
I mean, as you say, Ms. Dito, this was a country that had already been shattered by years of war and violence, even before this disaster struck. And I suppose, at least before the earthquake, maybe they had some sort of makeshift shelters, even if it was something that was very fragile and temporary in nature. The people that you met during your travels in northwest Syria, what are they doing now? Because presumably there's no safe drinking water, no sanitation, no food, no shelter or heating. How are they surviving?
Before Monday, February 6th at 3 a.m., Syria was described, northwest Syria has been described as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. And then an hour later, the earthquake hit. So you're talking about misery upon misery. People living in northwest, 4.5 million people, 2/3 of them have been displaced. 2.1 million children, they don't attend school. 66% are in the northwest Syria. 90% of the Syrian people are below the poverty line. All of this is before the earthquake, and now comes the earthquake. So we're gonna just let our imagination but I'll tell you some stories. I have seen people standing and sitting on a rock at the front of their collapsed building. And when I walked by them and I greeted them and I asked them, "Who are you?" And they give me their name. And then I'll tell them, "Where do you live?" "I live here." And they point at their house. And I'll tell them, "How's your family?" And they'll tell me, "My family is dead. The entire family is dead." And I can tell you that I have had this conversation at least 5 or 6 times. This is a common scene. People have these blank stares. People are trying to sift through their emotions. This is a very, very, tough disaster and tough experience for people to go through. I myself, I'm starting to wonder, what did the Syrian people do to this international community that they are treating them like this? This is the 9th day after the earthquake. And I can tell you, I have been there 7 days and I did not see a single evidence of aid coming through the country. And so what are people doing? What are people doing? They are trying to survive. They rely on organizations like us. They rely on the Syrian civil defense, the white helmets, to help them recover their loved ones. They're trying to find a place where they can be warm, and they're trying to find a place where they can be protected from the harsh weather. What they are doing, they're just simply trying to find a way to protect their children. It is a very miserable situation. I mean, I'm not sure if there are words that I could use to describe what the Syrian people are doing through. But I'll tell you what they're doing, something that makes me very proud, and that is they're sticking with each other. They're helping each other with little that they have. I have seen examples of those and of camaraderie. I've seen the best examples of humanity when I visited people inside Syria, and I have visited during this trip hundreds of people that I've met through. I've talked to them in groups. I've talked to them individually, and I've seen people that they are resilient and they wanted to survive this situation. But yes, it is
a great deal, as you say, a great deal of generosity, even in times such as these, and a very different response, certainly in terms of the international mobilization effort in Syria compared to Turkey, with people being left to fend for themselves and relying very much on smaller organizations like yours. But perhaps you can continue our conversation another time. Thank you very much, Ghassan Hito, for joining us there.